Emily Carver, a political commentator, thank you so much for your time today and for joining me. On the 24th of February, Russia invaded Ukraine and carried out bombings on civilians. More than 10 million Ukrainians have fled their homes and thousands have died. The UK have been leading in its response against Putin's aggression, providing over 400 million in humanitarian and economic aid to Ukraine. Has enough praise been given to the government for their handling of the Ukraine crisis so far?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I do get the feeling that a lot of people would rather suck a lemon than give some praise to Boris Johnson for anything that he's done right. I mean, when he went to make that trip to Ukraine, of course, there were accusations from parts of the media that this was just a PR stunt. Well, of course, it's a PR stunt. That's the point of these trips, isn't it, really? Anyway, for both sides to feel some kind of sense of allegiance, some sense of, that we've got someone on our side, which is good for Ukraine. And it is good for Boris Johnson because it does potentially distract from some of the other issues that he's facing. That doesn't take away from the fact that the UK, with Boris Johnson as our leader, has been doing pretty much the most out of any of our European countries. Far more. I mean, we've heard from President Zelensky time and time again how happy he is that Boris Johnson is taking a tough stance on this. Of course, we haven't been able to agree to everything that the Ukrainian president wants us to do. Of course, there was that huge debate over whether we should impose a no-fly zone. We've also had very confusing rhetoric coming from the White House, I think it's fair to say, ranging from at the start of this whole thing, well, before Russia had even invaded Ukraine, we had the president of the United States, President Biden, say that, potentially Russia could get away with a minor incursion, which was quite shocking. And then we've heard from the president of the US as well that, they wouldn't put boots on the ground. So sort of giving away what we might and might not do isn't very helpful. But I do think the UK stance and our armed forces minister as well have been very good. And they seem to be keeping everything on the table, which I think is the right thing to do.
Because as you mentioned, Boris actually visited, he went to Ukraine last weekend and the German president was actually uninvited. So I think the Ukrainian people and definitely President Zelensky is grateful for Boris and the UK's intervention in this. And you touched upon about Biden. And I know there's been videos of Biden and Nancy Pelosi stumbling over their words during this conflict, and I didn't agree with Trump on a lot of things, but do you think this conflict would have turned out differently if Trump was president? And after Elon Musk's recent intervention, do you think Trump could be allowed back on Twitter?
You know what? I'm one of those people who never thought he should have been booted off to begin with. Okay. You can't have leaders of authoritarian regimes allowed to spout their bile on Twitter and then not let the democratically elected president of the United States, Donald Trump, on there, however much you might be upset by his tweets. I do think that was a massive error on the part of Twitter. I have absolutely no idea whether Elon Musk, having bought this, now being such a massive shareholder in the company, will have any impact. I know that he's not going to be on the board. Etc. So I'd have no idea if this will be a change for free speech. I think that what's the most concerning thing at the moment is our own government's online safety bill, which a lot of people, a lot of free speech proponents and those who are worried about the government intervention in what we say are very concerned by this bill. And I think that will have a huge impact if it goes through, which it may well not. It may well fall under its complexities. But if that goes through, that will have a chilling effect on free speech, I think, because of the regulations and standards it will impose on tech firms. So I'm concerned about that. But we'll see if Elon Musk changes things up.
See what happens. And this conflict has gone on for quite a long time now. And there's been reports of maybe chemical weapons even being used in the city of Mariupol. And there's talks and mentions of Finland even joining NATO. Where do you see the direction of this conflict going in the next few weeks?
Well, it's very hard to say, and I'm not the armed forces minister or a strategic foreign policy analyst, so I can't say. To me, we're getting lots of mixed messages. On the one hand, we're getting the message that the Ukrainians are fighting back and that Russian troops have lost their morale. On the other hand, we're hearing that perhaps they're taking some time to regroup and that Russia will come back with a vengeance. And then add to that the fact that we're being told that there are potentially chemical weapons being used. So it's all looking rather terrifying. I have no idea where it's going. I'm glad that in terms of our support for the Ukrainians, we're now having Ukrainian troops over here to this country to learn how to use these different systems, these different tanks, etc., etc. I think that's brilliant. I think we need to continue our support. Of course, our support can't have no limits at all. It can't be unlimited, but we're doing a damn lot more than, say, Germany and other countries. I remember it was a few weeks ago, Germany essentially said, I think it was the foreign minister who said essentially that they'd run out of arms to send. So we certainly don't want to be in that position, but I'm hoping that this won't be drawn out for years and years and years, but who knows?
Yeah, let's hope it won't be. And this week also, Wakefield MP found guilty of assaulting a 15-year-old boy in 2008. He is appealing this verdict. However, if he is sentenced to a prison sentence, surely that would cause a by-election. And I think the vote in that by-election, if there was one, would show what direction national politics is heading. If there was a by-election and Labour lost, surely that shows that Labour are going nowhere near power, because this was a former Red Wall seat, and these are the seats that Sir Keir Starmer needs to get back hold of if he's got any chance of winning or getting anywhere near to power in the next election.
Yeah, I think by-elections can give us a little snapshot of the mood, although when it's someone like Imran Ahmad Khan who's committed sexual assault of a minor, that will obviously skew the result one way or the other, much more than it would have done, say, just in the general local elections that the government are going to have to face. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know who will be running in his place. I don't know who will be competing for that seat. But what I would say is that I think a lot of us are ashamed or concerned with the caliber of some of our politicians. I do wonder, we talk about the vetting process for MPs, for MP candidates. It's talked about as if it's very, very difficult, many obstacles, loads of background checks, etc., etc., etc. Yet we seem to end up getting criminals in our parliament, which I feel is somewhat absurd. And of course, this plagues both the Labour and Tory benches. I'd like to see a higher caliber of politician. I don't know how you get that when we're in the era of social media.
Yeah, it just seems to be like one crisis after another in the last 2 years, definitely. And Starmer has been leader now for 2 years. Many people are confused maybe about what the Labour Party actually stands for right now. They have been critical of the government throughout the pandemic. I remember seeing a video last year even of Beth Rigby, the Sky presenter, talking to a voter and them not even recognising who Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour Party leader, was. Has the Labour Party got an identity crisis at the minute?
I think it does, and I think it has for a long time. I think Keir Starmer, to be fair to him, has a very difficult job. When he came into the role, of course, you have very, very loud, passionate, far-left activists within that party, and many of the young MPs in particular too. So he's fighting a battle, but I think he should have come out stronger and told people what he stood for and told them what he didn't stand for. It's quite interesting that he's trying to reframe the Labour Party as the party of crime and punishment, essentially. He's trying to sort of bring back the red wall in that way, I'd say. But I'm not sure people will believe him when they see, on the one hand, him taking the knee to Black Lives Matter, which essentially, I mean, not everyone supports this who supports Black Lives Matter, but of course, Black Lives Matter is known for wanting to defund the police. So I'm not sure how much people will believe that even if Keir Starmer wants to get tough on law and order, whether he'll be able to with the makeup of his party.
I've seen recently their new slogan is like respect and it just, people have short memories from like a few years ago when it was weren't respecting like the referendum result, and they are trying to rebrand, and it will be interesting to see in the local elections and when the next election comes how successful that's been. Also, recently we've had Extinction Rebellion have been back. We've just gone through 2 years of the pandemic, but they've hit the streets of London again. And this month they've been conducting their largest demonstrations ever. Last Saturday, over 8,000 people protested and blocked roads around Oxford Circus and Trafalgar Square. They've been gluing themselves to like reception desks at Shell HQ in London. I've seen a lot of different people involved over the last few days. Are there tactics? Are they just putting off the British public completely? They're going about it in the wrong way.
Well, I think they are. I think most people view Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil as mad and totally out of touch with working people's lives. There's no justification for blockading oil at a time when there's a cost of living crisis and at a time when energy bills are rising. Yeah. That oil could have been heading to fill up a tank in a rural area for an elderly woman who was on her own and who now doesn't have the fuel to heat her home. I mean, they don't think these things through, and they talk about, oh, this is because, there's going to be a review into fracking. The government is U-turning on their net zero pledges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'm sorry, welcome to the real world. We're going to need gas for a long time yet. And unless you're going to advocate honestly that we should all live in the dark and use candles, then, you need to have a sensible conversation about decarbonisation in the long term, because they're not honest. They seem to believe that you could suddenly switch your fingers and we're all living only by wind turbines.
Most of the British public, obviously, they see climate change as a big issue that we need to tackle. But I think the government is committing to banning the sale of petrol, diesel and hybrid cars by 2035. Obviously, there's mention of nuclear power, but that can't be something that can be done overnight. It takes a long time to develop these things.
Well, exactly. I mean, the government understands there are trade-offs. In my view, it's taken them a long time to understand this. It was always that net zero was the priority. Now we've got, affordability and security back in the picture, and they're suddenly realizing that they're having to balance those things. Yeah. It's not sustainable for individuals. It's not sustainable for businesses to have their energy bills up so high. The government knows that. Will their energy strategy make any difference? I'm not sure. As you said, nuclear, that's 10 to 17 years away. I think fracking is our best hope in terms of getting those bills down. But again, that takes time. It's up to the government really has to reframe this whole net zero conversation and get it back into the minds of people that energy security is the most important thing, and then decarbonisation will come through technologies becoming cheaper.
Because it is insulate Britain, stop it all, like Extinction Rebellion. They're just making a lot of people frustrated if they're trying to get to work, or there's ambulances trying to get to hospital. Like, everyone understands climate change is a massive issue and we need to deal with it. But when they're doing tactics like that, they're alienating a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it seems to me that it's quite an undemocratic protest. These Extinction Rebellion lot, they have their view of the world and they wish to impose it on others. They wish to blockade people's lives, people going on. They're saying we know best. And that's why I think it almost borders on, authoritarianism in a way, because they're demanding that essentially everyone in this country, everyone in the world dramatically changes the way that they function day to day. And it seems to me that a lot of them tend to be middle-class poshos who have the time to come along to these things and don't have to worry potentially about having food on the table. And I think there's that awful conflict between working people who can't afford to be banging on about climate change every day of their lives and these protesters who seem to be completely out of touch. As you say, that's not to say that we shouldn't be doing something to decarbonize our economy. It benefits us all in the long run. But I would like to look at free market alternatives to the sort of solutions that these people are advocating, which it seems to me would put us back into the dark ages.
Partygate, which is a massive issue, like in the headlines over the last few months even. As someone that supported Brexit, I understood that we needed to get Brexit done and we couldn't have another referendum. And yes, Boris delivered that. And he did make some right decisions during the pandemic, including in December, not to shut the country down over Omicron, despite calls from opposition and members of his own party. And the vaccine rollout on the whole was viewed as a success. But it really troubles me and a lot of people this week that he's been fined, and Rishi Sunak and his wife, for attending a birthday party during lockdown. The PM confirmed he has paid the fixed penalty notice for going to the hour-long gathering, and he has apologised to the British people. What should happen now? Is an apology enough to move on from this?
You know what? I don't know if I'm in the minority on this issue, but for me, it just seems disproportionate to demand that the Prime Minister resign over this. From what I understand, this was a party, this particular party, and it may well be that more fines come to light and he's going to be fined more, that which may change things. But with this one party, it does seem to me this was a party, if you can call it that. I don't think they even cut the cake. If you can call it a party, was reported at the time in the Times Diary as if it was nothing, as if it wasn't even worthy of any attention, as if it was obvious. So we have a media class who are now demanding, well, or seen to be pro Boris Johnson resigning, having not realised it was even an issue at the time. So I do think that Boris Johnson does not have the utmost integrity, nor is he the most honest man. But I do think that this is being mobilised mostly by those who have always wanted to see Boris Johnson out the door. So I understand why people are angry. I understand why people are upset about the hypocrisy and the potential misleading of Parliament. I get that, but for me, we have bigger fish to fry.
I know the anger people are feeling as well. Like, I lost a really close relative during lockdown, and attending their funeral without having friends and family there and without a proper wake was difficult. And I get we've sacrificed so much, and I think the situation could change though if more fines come out. If there's repeated fines, there's reports from the Telegraph last night that facing second fines over an AIDS leaving event. If there's more fines coming out, then surely something needs to be done over this.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that there was a bit of a dodgy culture at the heart of government throughout the pandemic. But what I would say, just to give a little bit of balance, is that, of course, at that time, during the pandemic, the government were under the most severe, acute pressure from all sides to essentially fix a global pandemic and to, get us out the other side. So many demands for further lockdowns, demands for stronger lockdowns, tighter restrictions, etc., daily. There was so much noise that wanted to tell the Prime Minister to lock us down evermore. I'm not sure any other leader wouldn't have done the same.
Well, the thing is, it's difficult to know, like Theresa May or David Cameron's character, like it's difficult. Maybe it wouldn't have happened. The thing is, Conservative MPs, we know, are ruthless in their support for leaders, and look back at how they got rid of Thatcher and other leaders in the past. Like, they will keep their leader for as long as they think they are an electoral asset. But many people are saying, what is the alternative? Like, who would be coming next? With Theresa May, it was pretty obvious that Boris was probably going to be her successor. But who would be, if there was a leadership contest? Can we completely rule that out now over the next 6 months?
Well, I don't think we can rule it out. I mean, a lot of Boris's pals in Parliament will want to rule it out, and they've come out in support with their identikit tweets and social media posts in support of the Prime Minister. You know, I don't know what happens next, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not too urgent about Boris Johnson leaving his position. I don't feel urgently about it at all, is because I'm not sure it's the right time. I'm not sure there's public appetite for a leadership contest. I know a lot of people will see that just as an excuse. You know, there's always time for a leadership contest. But in my mind, this government isn't done yet. I would say that, I mean, people want Liz Truss, perhaps. Can't be Rishi now. I mean, should he resign as well? And then the whole House of Cards falls. Yeah.
Because it's normally like an underdog that comes through at the end. Like someone like Penny Mordaunt could literally just come out of nowhere and win a contest. But it is, a lot of Conservative MPs have backed the Prime Minister after this, and it'll be interesting to see in the next few weeks if there are more fines coming out, whether their support will continue. Emily Carver, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate the interview. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.